For this demo, we will be placing partially transparent objects, such as water and a sort of shadowy stop-motion animation, into a totally new photograph using blend modes. These two examples will both rely upon a pair of layer modes called Screen and Multiply. Here we have a picture of two birds on the bottom layer, and on the top layer we have three rectangles: white, 50% gray, and black. Notice that if I take the opacity and reduce the opacity of these rectangles, they all disappear at the same rate, regardless of what is behind them. The gray one may look more subtle, but you'll notice, especially when it goes over darker or lighter things, that it is still there. So with normal opacity, layers will disappear at the same rate. These are called blend modes or opacity modes, and they are listed right here next to the opacity reading on the layer palette. It doesn't say mode next to them. If you were to create a new layer, you can see the sentence is complete. It says normal, mode normal, opacity 100%. I remember that these are the modes just because it's kind of like a sentence. The normal opacity is 100% as opposed to all these other types of opacity. The two that we will be using are multiply and screen. Notice that with multiply, black stays completely opaque, gray darkens what's behind it, and white is completely transparent. Screen will have the opposite effect. White is completely opaque, while gray lightens by 50%, and black becomes completely transparent. So if you're inserting a light object, like water, in front of a dark background, like a black backing, you can use the screen mode and the background will just disappear and the water will show up. And where the water is not completely white, you'll have a natural transparency. Using the multiply mode, you will get the opposite effect, with the white background disappearing and the dark layer showing. For this example, I will have an image and then I have a video of water. So we have this picture of my son holding this boot, making an awesome expression. And now I have a video of water being poured out of a bottle in front of a black piece of cardboard that my son is kindly holding for me. So bringing the images into layers in Photoshop, we can see that they are different sizes, which is no problem. The first thing I'm going to do is trim this video of the water down. So I will bring my timeline right up here so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to trim. Now I will trim the timeline on the image so they're the same length. Move the timeline out of the way. If your background isn't perfectly black on your video, you can put a curve layer on it and set the black point. In this case, I think my video is close enough, so I am not going to worry about it. So before doing any transformations, I need to convert my video into a smart object, which I do just by right-clicking on the video and selecting the option Convert to Smart Object. Now that it is converted, I'll go ahead and switch the mode to Screen, and you can already see that this is starting to work. So once this is set to Screen, I simply rotate, that looks good, just hit Enter. That locks into place. Now to create a mask for this video, I'm actually going to hide it for a moment. And I am going to take the simple polygon tool. So I'll just grab way into the boot here. Sort of set up a stream for the water to come out. So obviously this is a little soppy. So I can fine-tune that by zooming in, switching to the magnetic lasso tool, which will help me trace the line. And now before making the selection, I'll hit Option, which turns it into a subtractive selection. And I'll start by carefully selecting that top edge of the boot and then selecting the rest of the selected area there, or ultimately deselecting it. So now that that selection is made, I will go to my layer with the stream of water and hit mask. Looking at my timeline, the effect looks pretty good. I can see in moments like this that my selection is a little too hard. Rather than softening it with the properties here, I am actually going to just use the brush tool, painting on the layer mask, brush set to minimum hardness, so soft brush. And I'm just going to kind of paint out those edges. Things look fine, but I'm still just going to tweak it a little bit by unlinking the layer from its mask to preserve that stream guide, and then just resizing it a little bit with the transform tool just to get it right where I want it. That should do just fine. And to export this as a GIF, we just go to File, Export, Save for Web Legacy, and we go through the same functions as before. We will be taking a dark object photographed in a sequence on a white background and animate that object in front of a photograph. So here in Photoshop you can see that our images are all different sizes. I took them at different resolutions and different orientations. It's not going to be a problem. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select all the images for my animation component. And keep in mind, I don't have too many frames here. So I've selected all these, and I will now right-click and choose the option Group from Layers. You can also do Command-G, and I'm just going to call it Anim, because it's the animated component. I will try the tree first, but I can keep changing it, so it's not going to be a problem. So here in this group, I can now apply a layer mode to the entire group, and I'm going to apply the mode Multiply. And you can see right away all the white has disappeared and only the dark is showing. If you have like a solid black object on a white background, then it won't have this transparency. For the sake of this image, I think that semi-transparency to it is kind of interesting. So now I'm not going to select the group itself, but instead select the first and last layer in the group with the Shift key. And now I will resize this object so it can be more like a orb floating over his hand. That's it there maybe. And I'm just going to try flipping it vertically. I'm not really trying to match the direction of light in this picture. This angle does kind of match it though. I'll just go with that. So now I will just hit Enter. I like the way this looks. I'm not going to use the back layer. Just going to drag that and get rid of it so it's not a distraction. I'm going to go ahead and crop this image. I don't want too much of the rest of the scene. And there we go. I have everything in place. I will now create a timeline. So I will go to Window, Timeline, Create Video Timeline. And now I click these three rectangles in this corner to make an animation. I mentioned this in previous videos. Don't use any key commands when manipulating your animations. You have to use the buttons within this palette. I will set this to no delay. And now I'll go to the little menu in the animation palette. I'll drag this up so you can see the whole thing. And make frames from layers. And now we have this animation. Just not exactly what we want, but we're getting there. So I'm going to go back to frame 1, and within the palette, I'm just going to delete that frame. So now this is frame 1. So having deleted that frame, I will now select all the frames, holding Shift, Now selected all the frames 1 through 15, and I will enable the visibility on that bottom layer. And because the layer is in the back, I can just enable it right across and it's not going to be a problem. And now when I hit play, we've got this jittery rotating orb.